Yeah, we've got international week coming up, and it's really frustrating because you don't get to watch Premier League and have that sense of joy when your players score. I just think they should carry on playing. I mean, I don't know why they stopped for this international break.
Yeah, how are they going to do that? I mean, all the players are going to be away. Your Kanes, your Haalands, your Gabriels.
Well, it doesn't matter. I mean, this is the chance for the managers to play their reserves bench, their substitutes bench. In fantasy league, you can start discovering all the players that don't normally get played because you've got a handful of players now that everyone's got in their teams, and you'll start discovering new players. It'll be great.
Actually a really good idea. Did you come up with that?
Yeah, that's my idea. I told you, Phil. I'm not as dumb as you look.
Thanks.
You keep forgetting to say when the music stops, and we just keep carrying on.
You're lucky enough to Michael Jackson, like woo woo. Annie, are you okay?
I was about to get up and do a moonwalk.
Are you okay, Annie? What's that? Yeah, how you doing? Hello and welcome to Top 4 FPL. I'm Van Duzel. This next to me is Sparky and Rock and Roll CEO on the decks. Yes, Rock and Roll. What's going on?
Yeah, I'm good, Van Duzel. How you doing? As Van Duzel was saying,
good.
Talking about changes to the Premier League rules. This episode's all about changes that you would make to the Fantasy Premier League. We have a few ideas. We'll be touching upon those during this episode. If you're liking what we're doing with our content, hit that subscribe button and share this video and hit the notification bell and like the video as well. So
and like the video and write comments. What do you think is our program good? Is our program crap? Do you like it? Are we stupid? Yes, we are. I know, but I don't mind. You could write it. Just do a comments for us, and we want to know who's watching us. And, we'd like to know what you think, so we can make our show better for you, and then you can make the show better for us. So go on, comment. Right, what are we talking about?
Sparky, we were talking during the week about Fantasy Premier League rule changes that were needed. Our Top 4 FPL admin tweeted about it last week as well. And we said we'd have an episode about rule changes that we'd like to bring. Over the years, what have you found that would make the game more enjoyable, more competitive?
For me, I would have said, obviously there's a huge population of the FPL community who always buy the same players. Obviously, you got players who are going to buy your Trents and your Van Dijks and your Cancelios and the main ones, because they're the ones who are likely to keep a clean sheet. Now I'm thinking to even the playing field a bit and make it a bit more interesting in terms of the defense, because I feel like the defense is a bit like the most exposed of all the positions in FPL. Like how the goalkeepers, they get points for making a certain amount of saves. I reckon they should have defenders for making, obviously, clean tackles and maybe aerial duels as well. So if they're completing aerial duels and tackles, they will get like a bonus point, if you like. So 3 tackles and they get a point, because I think how that would help, because the lower teams, let's say the lower bottom teams, they're going to be letting in goals. So to even that playing field, they're going to have to make more tackles, and they probably do. In terms of like when you're watching the games and corners are being taken, you got aerial duels. Most of the time they get cleared by the underdog, if you like. They should be rewarded for that the same way goalkeepers should. Just my thought. What do you think, Van Duzel?
Well, in that sense, then the lower teams, their players would be scoring higher than the other teams that never get attacked, like the keepers. So it would be a similar story to the goalies. The goalies that make more saves are the teams that are under attack the most. Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah, it'll make it interesting. When you say level the playing field, I think it would seesaw to the other side a little. So it would give the cheaper defenders an advantage. So basically the price of the cheaper defenders would be more expensive now because they'd probably be scoring more.
But they're going to be letting in. So they're not going to be, and also maybe not scoring as many.
So who's the best player?
Van Duzel, do you have any rule changes that you'd make to make the game a bit more competitive?
don't know if there's rule changes, but I thought of an idea which they might have. I don't know if it's fancy draft. There's a time slot where all the managers have to be present and you have to select your players, like picking teams in the playground. Basically, you can have a season with everyone with a different team.
There are fantasy games like that, and they do operate in pretty much what you just explained. But I've got 3 recommendations that I think, from a rules perspective and from a technical perspective, and by technical I mean the back-end perspective from the developers that obviously work on the fantasy Premier League platform, wouldn't be too difficult to implement for next season, could be done very quickly. First one, no-brainer. You cannot captain the same player 2 weeks in a row. Make that rule. Make that rule.
Yeah.
Definitely has to be done. I agree with that one.
You just leave Haaland, you just leave Kane as captain, or Salah, when Salah used to be good, as captain for weeks on end. And that's not managing the team. That's not fantasy Premier League management. That's just fantasy Premier League, leave my captain on as the same and watch the game. So that needs to be done. And if they do leave the same player, if they've forgotten about it, then it switches to the vice captain, and then following it, if they haven't been tracking the team, does it again. Very easy to do. A few lines of code in the back end. It's really easy to implement. Any disagreements? No. I think we're all agreed that needs to be done.
I mean, that was tweeted. Was it you?
Yeah.
There was a few adverse tweets to it, adverse responses to that one, I believe, in terms of why would you do that? I mean, a lot of them said it made sense, but there was a few who...
When you tweet stuff on Twitter, obviously people will come up and you could have the best idea in the world and people will knock you down for it, but that's another story. Vandu, you were going to say something about that?
About what?
The not having the same captain 2 weeks in a row.
I don't know if it makes sense in the footballing sense, because normally in a team you've got the same captain all the way through the season unless the manager changes it. But I don't think that makes much difference, to tell you the truth. I normally change my captain most weeks, depending on who's playing who. So it's not really, it's not something that will affect me. Normally, I can't make up my mind who I want to make captain in most weeks. So it's like, I don't mind if it's him or I don't mind if it's him. It's like, I want to toss a coin most weeks. So I don't know.
One other radical, it's not actually radical. Again, from a technical perspective, it would make it easier. I'm saying radical because it means changing the rules of the game slightly more than not having the same captain week in, week out. I would recommend you pick one player from each of the Premier League teams. So you have a squad of 20 and it has to be one from each club. And your budget is 120 million.
Yeah.
That way, it's going to spread, and all of the other teams are all going to be included. You might not pick them for that game week most of the time, but at least you'll be picking those teams so they're more included than left out.
That's a great rule. Yeah, I think from the beginning of the season, every manager picks 20 players, and that's your team for the rest of the year.
You can still make transfers.
No, when it comes to transfer window, like the real football teams, then we get a chance to do our transfers. But unless it's transfer window, January transfer window, and summer transfer window, that's the only transfer windows you've got. You've got no other options during the season to change, but those 20 players, you got to wait till January and you can change them again. So we only can get the players when, basically, our window is when it's their window. Same window. We are the managers and we're picking the players for 20 squad for the rest of the season, and then we'll see what a good manager you are.
That'd be an interesting angle. It might take some of the fun out of the game because people would maybe stop playing. But again, it could be discussed.
Yeah, no, I'm going to start making it now. Actually, that's my don't tell anyone. I'm going to make that game, It's just going to be called Real Fantasy League. Real Fantasy League. Don't steal my idea. Stop recording 1 minute. Real Fantasy League. Hold on, 20 players from the beginning of the season. Real Fantasy League.
While Van Duzel's picking his Real Fantasy League team, feel free to drop your comments on these ideas below, and also drop your comments with ideas if you have them for the rule changes that you'd bring as well.
And also drop your team into our league.
Yes, and drop your team into our league. Join from the link in the description below. You can join directly. And the code.
Not if you've got more points than us, though.
No, don't listen to him. Sparky, what are you saying? 20 players, one from each team.
Yeah, I would say just keep it to 15 and still make it one from each team. Why wouldn't you? It doesn't need to be 20 players. Why not keep it 15?
The reason I said 20 was so that every team in the Premier League is represented. Right now, most people pick a 4 million defender just so they can have him on the bench and pick more expensive players because obviously the budget. But this way, even though you may still leave those lower team players out of your first 11, everybody will be looking at those teams. It's like being more inclusive in terms of the league teams in the Premier League.
I think it would still be very inclusive if there was only 11. I mean, think about it. If you take my team, my natural team, when I start the league, I don't know if everyone does this, but this is me, but you can see it in everyone's team anyway. I always start with 3 Liverpool players, and then I tend to have like 2 players from Arsenal, 2 players from Tottenham, 2 from Chelsea, for example, which I had from the beginning of the season. That's already more than half my team dedicated to 3 real Premier League clubs. Sorry, that's 6, 3, right? And had that been 1 each, that means already in the first 11, I'm still going to have 11 teams represented.
Yeah.
And then 5 subs. That's 15. Like 15 teams are represented, and that's going to change. I think that'd be plenty. Yeah, I get what you're saying, but I think 15 would be plenty. With regards to the transfer window, every transfer window, I feel like that would be a bit extreme in the sense that it would probably make the game a bit more boring for people, if you know what I mean.
I agree.
I don't think, people want to manage it week in, week out, change their subs or change their, not say, but change players every week. That's kind of half the fun of, most of the fun of it.
The third rule that I'd recommend, and again, the previous rule, 1 player from each of the 20 Premier League teams, would not be too difficult to implement from a back-end coding perspective. I don't know if you're aware, some of you may be, Fantasy Premier League has what they call a fixture difficulty rating. They actually have this on the chart, and I can share it with you. And on this chart, you've got the fixtures and the difficulty rating for that fixture based on the team's previous 6 games. And it's an algorithm which they describe as being a really advanced algorithm, so they already have it. Bear with me here, this is what I'm talking about. So Arsenal's next game is against Tottenham at home, and for Arsenal, the Premier League has deemed this a medium difficult fixture for Arsenal. But if we look at Tottenham, it's a difficult game for Spurs at Arsenal, and they've rated it a 4. Brighton are away at Liverpool, and it's a very hard game, and they're at Manchester City on the 22nd of October, a very hard game. Point I'm trying to bring is, based on the difficulty rating of your fixture, so if you've got Trossard is a midfielder who, if he scores, gets 5 points. But based on this game, because it's a hard game, he should get double points. If it's for teams that are playing in this bracket here, 2, 3, 4, you get the actual points. But for the very easy games, you get half the points. So Haaland, most weeks, let's use Haaland, for example. He's got a very easy game. It's Manchester City at home to Nottingham Forest, where he scored a hat-trick. He should be getting half the points for scoring a goal. So normally 4 points for a forward, you get 2 points for that. So if you want to pick Haaland for that game, it's basically the same as betting. If you're betting on Manchester City to
that's exactly what I was thinking about. You're doing the bookies now.
Exactly. If you're betting on a game that's 5 to 1 on.
£5 each, everyone Ireland for a £5. Yeah. Come on, you ain't gonna get much points for him. Just give us a £5.
You're still going to get the points for him, but if it's that much of a banker, then you risk it. If not, then you go for something else. Right now, everybody's looking for differentials, trying to find differentials for their teams. This way, they've already got the algorithm here. If it's an easy fixture, an easy one, I'm just talking about 1. If it's classified as 1, they get half the points. If it's 2, 3, or 4, they get whatever points it is currently. And if it's a hard game, then they get double the points if they've scored in this. So,
so you just go for medium all the time because it's like neither that way or that way. So it's like when you're buying a coffee, you don't get a small one because it's too small. You don't get a large one because it's too large. You get the medium one.
It wouldn't. Or I think maybe a better way to do that is rather than half the points. So if it's an easy game and they're expected to score, you get your normal points. So 4 points.
The medium games, you get the normal points. The easy game, if it's an easy game, you get half the points.
But I kind of agree. I kind of agree. I agree with Van Duzel a little bit because it's like saying, all right, well, we're not going to use him, then we'll just go for the middle one. So to make it a bit more even, because Haaland costs 12 and he's only going to get you half points for
so
most
you
of the
wouldn't
season.
want to spend.
It doesn't really
Why
make
would
sense.
you spend that much money on a player that's when he scores, it's like half a point? It's like,
but what I'm saying is,
one goal. That's not fair. It's not
the
fair,
better way to level that out. The better way to level that out. I reckon it's a great system. I know what you're saying, CEO, but I think the improved version of that, if I may, is he gets standard points, so he still gets 4 points for a goal. But if someone's on the mid range, they get an extra point, so it'd be 5 points for a mid range because they're not likely to score, for example. And then if it's a hard game, he gets 6 points instead of 4 points, rather than the other way around. Do you see what I mean? So Haaland is still going to get you good points rather than half points. The mid range is going to get you 5 points, and then the level 5 hard is going to get you 6 points. So it's not going to make that much. You're not cutting anything away. You're just adding for that extra. I think that would be better, and that would be a great system.
Okay, so yeah, I understand what you're saying, Sparky, but to genuinely level it out, if you're betting on an easy fixture, if you're betting on a easy fixture, a home banker that someone's going to score a hat-trick, and it's an easy game, I think it'll make it more interesting. If you're only going to get half the points, then it means you have to look at your other players and actually managing the team to see who's going to get points in those games where it's not so easy to just say, okay, this guy's going to be captain. So anyway.
Yeah, fair point.
Diesel, you were saying you had a brilliant idea.
Yeah, no, I've got a brilliant idea, man. The idea I think is brilliant. Is the subs bench. You know, in a football match, when you take off a player, what do you do when you take off a player?
High five him.
You high five him and you bring on someone else in his place. It's called a substitution. When you make a substitution, you don't say, all right, go off and don't come back, do you? No, you don't. But on Fantasy League, when your player gets substituted, you only get the points for him for 70 minutes or 60 minutes or 1 minute, like my Doherty, which pisses me off. And you shouldn't, because in the match, your player should go off. If I've played for 60 minutes, your subs player should come on, and you should get the points for your subs player for the rest of the game that he's playing. Do you understand what I'm saying?
No.
No, not really.
No. All right. Jesus is on your team. Jesus
I think my
gets taken
bookies
off.
one was easier to understand. Go on.
Jesus gets taken off after 80 minutes. And who have you got on the bench? You've got, for instance, Harry Kane on the bench. Harry Kane replaces your Jesus for the remaining 10 minutes of that match plus the injury time. So any goals or any assists or points that Harry Kane gets for the last 10 minutes still goes to your points if you've got him on your bench.
I understand what you're saying. You're saying that your player's played for 1 minute and you're basically, that's it. Why should I only get 1 minute if he's played 1 minute? My son's coming on. The game starts. You just use a Jesus example. The game started. He comes on and Carl Walker injures him, and then he gets taken off after 1 minute. You're saying that
your bench player should be brought in for the remaining part of the game, whether it's 10 minutes, 1 minute, 2 minutes. You should still get points for the remaining bench player who comes on for that. You should. 100% you should.
I get it, but I feel like there's a lot of complications that can happen with that, and it should be very, very difficult to implement. For example, because I was thinking the same thing actually in the Newcastle game when I was watching it, because Isak went down in about like the 15th minute or something like that. He was holding his ankle, and I was like, oh, great. I've just used my wild card, and he got injured. If he gets taken off in 15 minutes, Isak comes off with 1 point, and I'm just left with him for 1 point. So I understand that. That's perfect. Okay, so what happens if there's lots of complications, like I said. What if? So
I can't
Jesus
think of a
taken off,
complication.
but one complication, for example, Jesus comes off on the 70th minute. So your substitute, Kane, comes on for
the remaining 20 minutes of the game.
But what if, and then in the real game, he gets subbed off in 10 minutes time, then your next sub comes on.
Yeah.
Then that player comes off, and then there comes, it could just be a rolling.
If you run out of subs, you run out of subs. There's nothing I can do about that. I mean, you're trying to make a complication.
Yeah, but
that's trying to create a complication here. No, there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. In real life, there's nothing you can do about it either. If you use up all your subs, you use up all your subs. Tough luck.
Actually, no, the rule is a brilliant idea, and
it is a good idea. Yeah.
But
it's a
there's only
brilliant idea.
There's the biggest but with it is, like Sparky said, from a back end perspective, from a coding perspective, it requires a lot of additional development to the back end.
No, don't worry about it. I can do all that. Just tell the Fantasy League. No, I'm going college again now. So I'm going to get my math. I'm going to get my maths GCE on my English as well. So
you've got your GCE in art.
I'll do all that. Don't worry. I'll just do an IT course and I'll just get that done. Don't worry about it.
I mean, if anybody can do it, Van Duzel can. But seriously, Fantasy Premier League a few seasons ago, if you remember, many seasons ago, they used to have a forum where you could leave a message for for your for other managers that were in your private league, and they got rid of that.
Yeah, chat.
That would be something that could be brought back in very easily. But having worked in IT for 20 years, I know how difficult it is from a product development perspective to get certain things done, prioritized, etc. So the rules that we've tried to introduce here or recommend here are quite easy to do on the back end. Banduzel's one's a brilliant rule, difficult to do on the back end, but he says he'll do it. What are your thoughts on these? If you have any recommendations on rules that you would like to see introduced, maybe tweaked, changed in Fantasy Premier League, leave them in the comments below. And
I have an idea.
Go on.
I reckon that you should have a fantasy league managers as well, so you can select a manager, because sometimes managers get sent off on stuff as well. So now managers get more involved in the game. Yeah. So
that's an interesting one.
Yeah. So if a manager like comes off the bench, and no, I don't want to do stuff like that, because the managers are going to know they're in the fantasy league and they're going to start running up and down on purpose or stuff. But if a manager makes a good decision, like does a substitution, the substitution scores, the manager gets points for it as well for making a good choice. There was a World Cup fantasy league once. Do you remember? In the World Cup, and they done the World Cup fantasy league, and you were able to choose a manager as well.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember when Joachim Low was also caught on camera sniffing his balls.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for reminding us.
Now.
On that note.
No.
So those are the rules that we think would improve Fantasy Premier League. We don't agree amongst ourselves on some of them. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you have any recommendations, drop those in the comments below as well. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. And we'll see you again next week.
Yay.